Leadership is the art of giving people a platform for spreading ideas that work. Welcome to DC Local Leaders, the podcast where we talk to C-suite leaders within the DC area. Our guests share their pathways to success and the important moments that impacted their careers. Lean in as we get the inside scoop on how they are shaping their industries, how they lead, manage, and connect with others. From the sectors of aerospace, defense, tech, IT, and more, this is Local Leaders. Your host has been making meaningful connections with industry leaders for over 15 years. Here's Philip Nathram.
All right. Thanks for tuning back in. We're back with another episode of DC Local Leaders. I'm your host, Philip Nathram. Today, we're going to be talking with Jerimiah Watts. Jerimiah is the Watts portion of D Watts, locally based here in the Washington, D.C. area. Him and his business partner, David Doherty, started this company 5 years ago. And Jerimiah just gives us an honest take on what was going through his mind as he went through this 4-year period of going back and forth and continuing to meet with David. And do they want to do this? Do they not? And some of the impactful moments that shape the way that they do business now and how they develop those core values that as a company they embody in every project they do. It tells us about the pumpkin plan and what that's meant to him and how that impacted both of them, how they run their business. So really excited to bring that to you. Thanks again to everyone who is liking and subscribing all of our videos, all of our podcasts, both on Apple and Spotify. Also, Notecast. If you're unfamiliar with Notecast, we are live on Notecast. Notecast allows you to take notes directly from the podcast. So if you just tap the screen and hold it down, it will make an audio note, and it will also send you the text in the form of an email. So you don't have to take anything, you don't have to write anything down. So book recommendations, things like the pumpkin plan, meditation practices, or just business planning, 360s, things that were helpful for them to know as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, or just even as a leader within their company or their community. If you want to take that note too, you don't have to worry about writing anything down. Notecast makes it easy. So looking forward to getting into this episode, and thanks again for tuning in. Yeah, well, welcome, Jerimiah. Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. We're back with another episode of DC Local Leaders, and today you're our guest, Jerimiah Watts from D Watts Construction.
Philip.
The listeners may not know this, but we've known each other for a very long time.
We have.
I remember it was 95 pounds. So how old were we there? You were a little bit older.
Yeah, man. That was, I guess we were about preteens there. That's right. You were a little younger. But
yeah.
You were still on the team rolling with us.
Yeah, because I was heavy. I was playing line. I was the center. You remember?
Yep.
Started playing center and then eventually lost a little weight and became tackle and then guard. But by then you were in high school and we played together. I was on junior varsity while you were on varsity in high school. And then you went on to Brown and played there too.
Yeah.
D Watts Construction. That's you and David Doherty, right? So Doherty Watts is what D Watts stands for.
Yep.
How many people are in your company?
So now we're just wrapping up 5 years as a business. We're a 28-person firm, $50 million in volume as a general contractor in the local market. So. Yeah.
And when did you start?
So we started, I think, to the week 5 years ago.
Really? So this is your anniversary week that we're recording
this is it. Yeah, we're wrapping up 5 years, and it has flown by.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about yourself and your path. I mentioned Brown. So you were at Brown, and then you did work for HIT for a while, and now you're at D Watts. You know, I'd love to hear kind of why you thought you wanted to do something on your own. You were already a leader at HIT. How did you decide to make that next step?
Yeah, it's it was a long time coming. I actually, my story, I kind of stumbled into commercial real estate. I didn't know what I was going to do out of school. At the time, I had a mentor who happened to be in real estate, a gentleman by the name of Tony Gould, who worked for Newmark Knight for 20 plus years, and he connected me with senior management at a company, HIT Contracting. I kind of took a chance and just jumped into it. And, I spent 12 years right out of school with, lucky didn't realize how blessed I was early on, but come to find out, just one of the best in town at what they do, and really learned the right way through the years. And, I'd say it was probably almost 10 years in, 8 to 10 years in. And I had always had kind of that entrepreneurial thing in the back of my mind for even as a young guy when I got started. And it took a while to finally get comfortable and confident in the idea that I could jump out and do it. I probably went back and forth about 4 years or so before I actually finally pulled the trigger. And for me, it just really came down, I love what I was doing, great people there, I love what we were doing out in the market. But for me, it turned into a little, I think I asked myself this question a little bit at the time when it's all said and done, years down the road, right? And I think we all kind of maybe we play these games with ourselves or visualize, what are they going to say about us and our life spent, our time spent. And a couple of things that really moved the needle for me personally was the idea of really giving back and influencing, giving opportunities to others, and it was the idea of showing that success could come in different tones and hues. And, being a diverse, African-American guy myself, not growing up with a ton of mentors, or I didn't have a bunch of people that looked out like me doing stuff like, growing businesses or, at least in my circle, my family circle. So I love the idea of potentially becoming that for someone. Those were just some pretty cool whys that ultimately gave me the push I needed to jump out there and at least give it a try.
When you say going back and forth, right, you're coming up with the whys, and I love that. Did you read Simon Sinek's Starting with Why?
I've come across Simon's. He's a big why guy, and somewhere through this journey, I don't know exactly when, but connecting with his message. But yeah, I'm a big why guy. So to talk about kind of that back and forth though,
because that's a long time, right? 4 years.
It is.
That's got to be agonizing to think that, because you were doing well at HIT. I mean, right. I know your career at HIT. You were doing really well and working on some really great projects. But it sounds like there was something in there within you that you wanted a little bit more. What did that feel like for that 4-year period?
Yeah, I think looking back is. One, it's for me, I think the biggest holdback for me, honestly, it was confidence, a genuine belief that I had what it took to go out and do what I see so many of these other successful entrepreneurs and business owners doing. I didn't grow up with a bunch of folks, like I said, in my circle or new folks, whether that's uncles or friends of family or anything where I saw it happening. I think in the back of, at least in my mind, that influences your confidence, your own confidence in yourself. I tell you, and this is a side tangent to that, but this is why I'm a big believer that diversity matters, right? It matters in leaders of positions of leadership, or, in the classroom or wherever, whatever facets of society. Because, it allows others to see themselves in those roles. And so for me, just kind of coming back to it, not having that, right. And really just not truly believing that I had what it took. And I think part of it is because, there's some part entrepreneurship to some degree, it's a mystery behind it. Like, I think people don't fully understand what it takes or what the risks involved, and it's scary. It's scary, right? And it was no different for me. And on one hand of the coin, I knew what I was doing. Technically, very sound at what I was doing. I had relationships, but I think that unknown behind the mystery behind entrepreneurship kind of keeps you on the cliff. It keeps you from jumping off because it's scary. What we don't know, right, is it's scary. And so just kind of waffling between the two. And honestly, it took 4 years for the whys to sink into the point where it's like, all right, the whys had to outweigh the fear, right? And so I think,
what was that last straw that broke the camel's back for you, that really pushed you over that edge and said, you know what, I'm jumping?
I tell you, no, that's a good question. The final straw for me, and it was kind of connected to the why. I just remember one night thinking, because at the time I hadn't really started my family yet, and I knew at some point kids were going to come. And
how old were you at that point, can I ask?
So at that point, I guess I was 35 years old.
35,
right? So,
and at the time you were single.
Yep, I was engaged, right?
But so you had someone around.
That's right. I was engaged, and I knew in the next couple of years we were gonna, make it official and start the families and stuff. And so it was two parts there. One was like, all right, if I'm going to do this, now's the time. I've got the energy. I don't have the added responsibility of the children. But the other thing for me that really pushed me over the edge is finally, it's coming back to the why I mentioned earlier, like this yearning to be a face and represent, right, for others that maybe come from humble beginnings or maybe that look like me or, and a minority, et cetera. And I said, man, I just said to myself, look, Jerimiah, you're an Ivy League graduate who learned at one of the best in the town, arguably in the country, building large, complex construction projects. You've got a certain hunger and relationships with you. And if you don't go out and take a chance and take a swing and try this entrepreneurship thing, then who else should be, right? Like, and at the end of the day, for me, it's like, I've been blessed with all these things up to that point. And I just, it was the final straw. I said, all right, now's the time. Before the family starts, I've got to give it a shot so that, what I'd love one day for my son or my cousins and nephews or whoever to be like, hey, Uncle Jerimiah, hey, he's done this over the years. Yeah, you can do it, or go talk to him, right?
Right.
Something that I never had.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is, this concept of you can't be what you can't see, right? Yeah. So if you don't have any examples of whatever it is around you existing, we don't know what we don't know. It may just never occur to you that you can do that.
Right.
Right? If you've never encountered a person that made widgets, you wouldn't even think of, hey, maybe I could be a widget maker.
That's right.
That's
right.
just a human thing. It wouldn't even come to mind.
That's right.
So during this time, so you reached that point. Where did David Doherty come into play, and how long had you guys known each other?
Yeah, so one thing. Once I made the decision, all right, I'm gonna do this. So what I started to kind of just reach out to folks that I respected in the industry, that I knew through the years, other business owners, other entrepreneurs, as kind of a last back check, just to really pick their brains and like understand what I was fully getting into, and things to think about. And one of the things that came out of one of these sit downs and lunches was the idea, I'd actually really recommend you think about, finding someone you trust and respect, maybe, connecting as a partner. That person gave me kind of the pros and cons to it, but there were way more pros to having someone an equal to go out and kind of share some of that risk and that stress and, just kind of the, working together to create something special. And I love the idea of it. And then, in that moment too, it also hit me that, or it came out in that conversation. They said, be careful though, because it's going to be like a marriage, like once you all go, whoever you team up with, you're tied at the hip with that person, and there's no easy separation at any point, right? And so, you start thinking of folks you know, and like, well, who may be that right fit? And I tell you, you realize it wasn't a very big list. It really wasn't, of people that, all right, you could really see yourself, quote unquote, getting married to and dedicating yourself to. But I tell you, Dave was one of those people for me. I knew him his years at HIT. He was a guy who spent some time at HIT. And just a good guy, family guy, 3 daughters, just doing things right, well respected in the industry. I got to see him up close in our time together at HIT. He focused on high-end law firms. That was his bread and butter and his teams. And the other thing I really liked about Dave, my career was very linear. Junior guy to 12 years in at HIT. Dave, the one thing I liked is he had a little bit of varied experience. So he actually went to a couple other bigger firms. And, one of the things I really loved was his varied experience in being able to kind of see how others think about things and what we do and different, right? And so his personal attributes, his relationships in town, that varied experience, I thought we'd be, a kind of a good fit to sit down and at least see if this made sense. And that's what we did. We sat down and, sure enough, I think a funny story. Not a lot of folks know this. I think when we first sat down, at first Dave, I think he was just in the point in life where his exact words to me when I first kind of sat down and I thought that this made sense. He said, "Man, I kind of wish you would have connected with me a year or two ago. But at this point, Like, I think at the time he was expecting his third daughter.
Okay.
They had just bought the dream home.
Okay.
And he was just like, man,
He had responsibilities. He wasn't able to.
growing responsibilities. And he was, he was doing great stuff over at Gilbane, kind of growing their interiors group. And he shot me down, man. He,
What'd that feel like? Like, what do you do? Because you have this dream.
Right.
And now.
Well, at the end of our dinner, it was nothing but respect, nothing but love, completely understood it. And I had to make a decision, though. Do I still have the confidence to go out and go do this on my own now? Like, Dave was like he was like one of the only people, honestly, I knew and trusted at the time. And so I was kind of weighing that, but I decided, you know what, I am going to go do it. And then about a week later, it's funny, I'm sitting in my living room, and then I get a text, and he's like, damn it, I can't stop thinking about it. Let's catch back up and talk a little bit more, over another dinner. And that's what we did. And 5 years later, here we are. Our individual strengths and weaknesses played off well with each other. And I think from this story, that is one piece of advice I'd give to others in that similar situation. It shouldn't just be about, the person's a good person or not, and they've got the experience, but understanding your own strengths and weaknesses and trying to partner with someone who complements that well. And I mean, I kind of got lucky in this sense, and I think that's been the part of the secret to our success as well.
Yeah, well, so to that, looking back, right? Let's take that example of someone who is very technical in their experience, right? Maybe it's contracting, maybe it's anything else, right? Marketing, pick any profession. Having the lens that you have now, what are some of the things that you think you would suggest to someone to do to find out what those strengths and weaknesses are so that they can honestly evaluate that, right? I think having being right-sized and having an honest appraisal of what we do is what being humble is, right? It's not being humiliated is not being humble. It's understanding what we do well and what we don't, being happy with what we do well. And yes, we can improve. It's kind of like, I had a great example from another person that was on the podcast. He mentioned that, if his weakness was batting and they were playing baseball, he could get better at getting on base, but if he had someone else on his team that hit a home run every time, was that the best use of his time?
Right.
Does he need to get on base at this point?
Right.
Maybe he's better in the dugout or in the outfield or wherever. Right.
Yep.
How do they find that out? Right. Like the burning desires in there.
Yeah. Great question. And I think, what are you passionate about? What gives you energy? What activities and tasks that you find yourself doing that, you blink and you open your eyes and it's 45 minutes later? Like, what are the things that you really enjoy, first of all, right? I think that's a pretty good clue of like just where you're naturally inclined and like what you gravitate towards. For example, if you're a people person, you love to talk and like get to know people and connect and like, right, like that's where you get your energy from. Well, you know what, that business development thing, maybe it kind of, right, it's part of your strength set. But I'd say the other thing is not just to stop there. But I think some really solid 360s, feedback, getting it from people who know you best, because sometimes, we all think we're really good at something or this or that, and come to find out, not as good as we thought, right? And so I think an honest, feedback from your peers, from folks who know you, that give it to you straight, not to give you what you want to hear. Dave and I kind of back and forth early on too, trying to figure this out. And this is some of the things that kind of helped us kind of fine tune a little bit. I think the third part though to that question, especially, whether that's start up a business, create a team, grow a team, is you got to also take a step back and assess what are the strengths that you need in that endeavor, in that company, in that team. Like, what are the things that move the needle the most? Right.
Specifically for what
you're trying to do. Right. Because, there's certain, whether it's industries or goals or things, some of those strengths or weaknesses may not matter as much too. So I think that's the other part of it. Right. It's the kind of combine those and then take your strengths and weaknesses and fit it into that endeavor, however makes the most sense. Right. And then, I think the final point to this is to continually assess and reassess if it's working or not, right? And being open to that and having that flexibility. And that's something else that I think we've tried to do a pretty good job at as we've grown.
In those early days, what were some of the things you were doing together as a unit and as a team, and as you added more members to continue to reevaluate those strengths and weaknesses and grow along a certain line to develop as a leader, develop as a person, that kind of thing.
As you start a new business, what you quickly learn is that regardless of your strength or weakness, you're doing a little bit of everything. That's just the reality.
Was
right?
it just the two of you in the beginning?
In the very beginning, there were 4 of us. David and I, we brought on a superintendent, and then we brought on, and it was actually a family member of mine. It was my sister who I trusted to be our quote unquote office manager and just kind of front desk and help us, with all the loose ends, that we'd need help with in the early days. And so she came on board. And a funny memory, I just remember we just had, we got some office space, found a great deal. It's 2,500 square feet. And our first day of business, we had a couple picnic tables, and it's Dave, myself, and our superintendent sitting there, and they're like,
"This is
all right. This is it. We're open for business now. What do we do? You know,
no projects,
no projects,
no income on the balance
no
sheet,
income, none of that, and there was some pre-planning up to that point. So I mean, we knew, day one, it was just like getting the message out there, going out, connected with people, and I'm giving you kind of the inside scoop, on how to think as you're starting up a company, and some of the things we did. Well, we said, all right, well, what does a successful construction company look like in, period, whether it's 1 year, 5 years down the road. And actually, we tried to go a little down the road. We said, what does it look like in 5 years, 10 years? Let's kind of map that out, an organization, an org chart with roles, and what does it need to function at a high level? And then for us, it was to function at a high level in the type of work we want to do. And that was, high-end commercial office spaces, the bigger, the better, the more complex, et cetera. And so what does that look like, and what are all the roles that we need to fill? And so we drew out that org chart. We looked at the different teams and sectors and behind the scenes that we need. And then we said, all right, well, we've got to divvy up all these roles and cover them. So, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we're a 3-person, 4-person firm or a 30-person firm. Like, the stuff has to get done. And that's where, that's where I was going earlier. It's like, as an early co-founder, you're wearing a lot of hats, and we're doing a lot of the same stuff, and it doesn't matter. We're trying to, because at the end of the day, the external experience for our customers and clients and subs, it has to feel the same. It has to look the same. And so that's the challenge, right? So I think in the early days, it's a little less about kind of fitting in where your strengths and weaknesses are. It's hopefully we all got the flexibility and the commitment to do what's needed to do what we have to do to deliver what we're selling at the end of the day. And then now as time goes on, right, you start to, it was funny, after a year goes by, we got up to 10 or 12 people, and you start to remove your face from that org chart, and 15 positions. Now you got some people replacing you in a couple of these roles, and you continue to do that, right? And we're still doing that. There's still, we're still wearing multiple hats. Not as many, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But it's a continued thing. But I will say, as the company has grown, now we're the last couple of years, we're starting to get in that position where we can really reassess what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and what's the best use of our time, like you mentioned earlier, Philip. So.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot that I think just goes back to what you were saying in the beginning, that you can't be what you can't see. You guys sought out the companies that you want to emulate.
That's
and
right.
you looked for that example of the type of company you'd like to be in, something that already existed, right? You can't be what you can't see. So you went and saw something that looked the way that you wanted your company to look. And there's a lot of advice out. If you want what they have, do what they do. And that applies to so many different things, right? If I see someone else in the gym and they have the body style or the athleticism that I want, then I should probably practice their diet, their workout routine, their lifestyle habits, and I probably will get what they have, like that sort of thing.
Right.
If you see someone that has the career style, the career that you want, do what they do. If they're constantly learning and reading and going to networking events and associating with other people that can help them do something differently, then do that. If there are things, those habits.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Philip. And it, it's not always about reinventing the wheel and trying to do it all from scratch. But yeah, like you said, it's there are examples, there are folks or companies that have gone before us, and of course you build from it, you get creative, you try to add something to the mix, which is key too, especially to differentiate yourselves in the market. Now you have to do that, but it's not starting from scratch.
Right. People are expecting a certain type of product when they're hiring a GC, for example, especially for Class A interiors build out sort of thing. And you have to at least be that. I want to get into you as an individual, right? And some of the things that you're practicing as an individual, and then how it applies to your ability to lead your team. How many people do you have in your company again?
Sure. So we're 28 people.
28 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a big responsibility, right? That's 28 people that are counting on you to be as healthy as possible, to be as mentally sound as possible, to be as motivated as possible on a daily basis, to make good decisions for them.
Yeah.
Right? To lead them.
There's definitely a certain amount of pressure that comes with that.
Yeah.
Especially as you grow and as this company grows, and, our people are our biggest asset. But understanding that attached to every one of those people are family members and loved ones and children. And yeah, it can be, when you take a step back and think about that responsibility. It's pretty special though, to understand that.
Yeah. What do you do to prepare yourself for that kind of responsibility? Do you have like a morning routine or some sort of journaling? I know that you mentioned mentorship like right in the beginning, which, I love that. So I'd love to hear how that plays a role in what you do on a daily basis.
I think mental health and clarity is everything, especially kind of in the role that I am now. And I'm juggling a lot of things, a lot of responsibility. We've talked a lot about kind of the professional stuff. I should also note I've got a couple kids that came around after the business started. So
right.
They're both under 5, and we got a 5-year-old business, and so yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to juggle, and especially when you're serious about doing it the right way, right? So professionally and at home, like I want to be there for them and be a good dad, be a good husband, and so it's definitely demanding. It's definitely demanding. But for me, coming back to, the question and the routines that have helped with that balance. Yeah, I've always been a big, I love my quiet time. I'm a big, both before I go to sleep and in the morning. That's kind of my routine. It's sandwiching my nights with a little bit of decompress. Before I go to sleep, I never leave the TV on right before sleep. Usually an hour before bedtime, trying to like shut things down, wind things down, whether that's a book or just kind of quiet time. But the morning routine has always been a big one. And it's tough. It's tempting in our world to jump right away and start being productive and checking emails and this and that. But a rule of thumb is I definitely try not to pick up the phone first thing in the morning. Usually try to give myself about an hour. Over the years I've grown. I never used to be a morning person. I think construction naturally changes that. With superintendents who are up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, hitting on the road, and I've grown to enjoy that morning quiet time, especially before the family stirs and they're up. And so, it's often, I'm often up at 4 or 5 o'clock at latest, just kind of up. And for me, that part of that routine though, that I always try to do each morning is really just have a few minutes to let the thoughts go where they go, and just, kind of focus on breathing a little bit. But two things for me is gratitude. I'm a big gratitude guy, and trying to connect with that each day. This may not be every day, but I'm also a big kind of like self affirmations, and just kind of a reminder, that, whether it's, you're smart, you're creative, you're blessed, right? Just trying to speak that positivity into yourself to start the day. I think like a lot of us and, type A's, like we want to be, do this and do that. And we're tough on ourselves. We can be a lot of us are, right, throughout the day. And, there was a book I read years ago that kind of opened me up to this, but it was called The Power of Now. And so that idea of that, it's amazing how much our mind is constantly running 100 miles an hour during the day. And a lot of that mental, just, back and forth of stuff that we're not even fully conscious of. And part of that is a lot of that mental activity can be negative if we're not careful, right? Really hard on ourselves, negativity, et cetera.
That self-talk.
Right. And so for me, I remember, and again, this might have been a decade ago or so now, but understanding that's how we're wired as people, as humans, right? And so like trying to carve out some time each day to counter that has been important for me. And so, yeah, the routines are important. And for me, like that little slice of the day, it just gives me a reset so that now I can jump into the madness again, right? And get after it and do it at a high level. And I'll tell you, at the end of the day, I'm exhausted, and I look forward to my quiet time again to kind of right to reset. So, and then the other thing you asked about was journaling. And yeah, I tell you, I don't know where this came from, but I've been a big fan of journaling since I graduated from college. So like my early 20s. And I don't know what if it was something I read or suggested I tried, but I am so glad I did years later. Now I'll be 40 here this year, and I've been doing it now for almost 20 years. And my journaling, it's not every day necessarily, but it's, I don't know, every few weeks. Sometimes I go a couple months and I skip it, but it's just like, what's kind of something I've learned, or just some insight I got. It could be from back then, it might have been a breakup, a relationship, to something at work, to a trip, like whatever, but just some like needle moving insight. And then, in that moment in time, to drop it on paper. And it's been really cool now looking back over the last 20 years at these entries, and really kind of recapping this journey, along the way. And like mentally, it helps with some of that perspective now, right?
Yeah, those are the impactful moments that make you, right?
That's right.
And you're doing that journaling, you're documenting it. Yeah, and you can't really remember where you came across that. Like, what about the sandwiching? Where did you get that idea? Did someone put that thought in your mind, or how did you come about?
No, I think that just happened as a necessity, man, especially in my world and, what we do. And, I'm not going to say necessarily just my world, because I think a lot of us in the DC area, it's crazy in what we do. It's running 100 miles an hour constantly. But, I can speak to what I do for a living. And I know in construction, fast-paced construction, where you're juggling a bunch of projects, you're juggling, a bunch of subcontractors and clients, and everything does literally move 100 miles an hour. And for me, someone who takes pride in delivering at a high level and being 100% on all day long. I mean, from the moment you get up and go in, I used to be in the office 7 o'clock. I'm there to 6 o'clock, 6:30 some days, right? And just the night thing was just a necessity. Like my head would literally be spinning after these days, where like I just needed to unplug. I didn't want to listen to anything. I didn't have the mental energy to watch TV or watch the news. And so it just kind of grew in a habit, right? Where like it got to the point where I needed it. I look forward to that, just decompressing time before bed. And it's funny, now, last few years, obviously I've got the wife now and the kids, and that challenges my my ability to decompress the way I like, because we finally get the kids down now, and I literally have an hour to go where I have some quiet time with my wife. So she shares my quiet decompressing time, but she's great, and I'm okay with that. But yeah.
Has your routine and habits, has that sort of rubbed off on them? On your wife, or what about your kids? Like going back to exactly where you started, right? You can't be what you can't see. They see dad doing that. So that's impacting their life. They see you running this business and being accountable to other people, but taking that necessary time for yourself to make sure that you're accountable to you too.
Yeah.
Are they doing it too?
I will say, I think it's rubbed off on my wife some. She's grown to love it. She's grown kind of to embrace that quiet time too. Now I have a 4-year-old caveman as a son, so no, not it hasn't quite rubbed off on him yet.
Okay.
I'm hopeful that it will eventually. And my daughter now, she's just turned 1, so they're a little young. But to your point, I am hopeful that it will rub off on them as they start to get a little older. And the other thing for me that I've learned through these, just part of my routine is, I think that quiet time that's sometimes where the motivations and creativity actually come from, when you actually kind of shut down your own thoughts and craziness. And whether you're spiritual or not, or religious or not, like for me, I have my own beliefs there, and like where some of that inspiration and creativity comes from. And I think of it as a way, for me personally, like that's where God speaks to me, and that's that, because I'm giving him an opportunity to do so. And so again, like I think it is something that's a good thing for all of us, and certainly my family. I hope it's something that rubs off.
You mentioned earlier on mentors, right? You had a mentor from a firm, and I think he went to Brown, right? That's how you met. Yeah. Is he still in your life now? Do you still have mentors? Many people have more than one for different reasons. You might have a mentor in business and then a mentor in life. Other married guys that are in successful marriages could be a mentor for being a working person with 2 kids.
Yeah, it's a good question, Philip. And actually, no, I don't have a consistent mentor. And the gentleman I mentioned earlier, Tony Gould, great guy. He's since retired and kind of moved out of the local area here, but we do keep in touch every once in a while. But that's one thing that, I guess if I were to assess my situation now and looking back the last few years, that I think's missing for me personally. Like I hear and I understand the value associated with that. And so no, I don't. And it's funny, this actually connects to something I mentioned earlier, right? It's just like not growing up necessarily with, certain role models or opportunities there. Like, because I think a lot of our mentors come from, sometimes it comes from family or connections through family or uncle this or that, and again, that was just one area that I didn't quite have. But with that said, like I do think that I've been blessed to know certain people along the way and certain people along the journey that have always kind of been, been willing to grab a lunch, been willing to share advice and this and that. I just never developed a consistent one that I kind of carry through the years. And then, I think one of the ways though I've tried to fill that void is I do read a lot. There's so much information out there now. I mean, this, where we are in time with, what's on the internet, to documentaries, to, social media and influencers, and you can get a lot of insight and a lot of mentoring for free too, just by, trying to find what you can out there. And that's helped.
That's what I was going to say. Sometimes the mentor isn't necessarily someone and meet with that's actually in your circle. Like I listen and follow a number of people, and I would consider them to be my mentors as well.
Yeah.
Right? So who are some of the people that you're reading and listening to and following?
Yeah, I love Gary V. He's a good one. He tells it to you straight. I mean, all his stuff, I'm always like clicking on and looking at. I respect what he's done, and just to, straight to the point, no BS. And you mentioned Simon earlier. And his material, and I'd say I really do read. I'm a voracious reader. I'm always reading. I think normally 2 or 3 books at a time. I'm kind of rotating just what I feel like that night. So I'd tell you the other thing I do that's helped through the years. I always kind of make a point to sit down and grab lunch or connect with 2 or 3 people a year that, again, that have done this or they have taken businesses to where I want to take it in a few years. I try to get on their calendars and just kind of, touch bases and connect.
You can't be what you can't see.
That's right. Just exactly right. Just to hear their stories, to understand it. I'm reading and speaking of that, I'm reading a good book right now. It's How I Built This. Yeah. Right. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, he's got podcasts.
Yeah, that's right. And coming back to everything we're talking about now, like that book, I love it because all it's doing is telling the behind the scenes and the stories of these businesses who started from nothing and grown to where they are, the Airbnbs, the Cliff Bars, and that's cool because I love books like that. There's another one, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the story of Nike. Amazing. Like, I definitely recommend that as another book, but just it's so cool just to see how, and what I tell you, one thing you realize, talk about the confidence piece I mentioned earlier. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't think I could do this, but what these stories show you is that most of these people are they're just regular folks struggling with the same insecurities you are, or we are, and like had their whys and went out and just gave it a shot. And, sure, there's a lot that don't make it, but there are those that do. And almost to a T, every single, almost, I'm not going to say all of them, but a lot of them, again, at the end of the day, they're just regular folks and taking a chance and, a little luck here and there. And, it's amazing what they've built. It's like a day at a time, but they've done some pretty special things.
Yeah, that's one of the hugest lessons that we've been learning with the DC Local Leaders podcast, and that I hope that everyone that's listening can absorb as well, is that, it's working through that vulnerability and that fear and taking those steps one day at a time to get right through that. I can only speak for myself. In the past, when I saw successful people or people doing something that I thought maybe I'd want to do, there was this idea behind me that they were doing it because they were good at it, not that they were good at it because they were doing it. That it was just this barrier that I can't do. And then to hear their actual stories, well, they're just as terrified of everything that I am, depending on the moment in time you talk to them.
That's right.
They'll be really confident at 2:00, but then at 2:05, they're, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. And they're people. We all have the human condition, and it's more of our reaction towards some of those things that help us.
That's a great point. That is well said. That's well said. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's huge. That's why I want to interview people back to your point. You can't be what you can't see, right?
Yeah.
If we didn't have the experiences of those people shared with us, we wouldn't know that they're just people just like us, and that we can do it.
That's right.
Right. Otherwise, I would just think that they're super smart, or they're just somehow just better at knowing how to do things. They just more creative than I am, or whatever whatever your insecurity happens to be.
Yeah, that's man, I love the way you put that. Like, you assume that they are just really good at being a business owner or whatever of what they're doing, but that is not the case.
Yeah.
And as we've had this conversation, that was well put. And hopefully my story is a testament to that too. Like, I've said this now, looking back now, the 5 years, it was all about jumping off that cliff. I like to look at it, jumping off the diving board into the pool. When you're in the pool, you're going to swim.
Yeah.
The scary part is just to jump off into the 12-foot section the first time jumping into the deep end.
Right.
Right. And so looking back, you jump in, you will figure out, you will swim. You're going to kick. You're going to move. You're going to do what you need to do so you don't drown at that point.
Right.
And so, that's our story, right?
Yeah.
And it's like day at a time. Oh man, there's challenges here, there's challenges there, but all right, let's do what we need to do to figure it out. Let's research it. Let's bring in experts, somebody else that knows better than us, and you just take it a day at a time. And now, this week I sit here at 5 years, and
And there's a quote that I'm probably wearing out on this podcast, but if you want to take the island, burn the boats. Because there's no going back.
That's right. That's right.
One thing I really appreciate, you never once brought up profits. You never once brought up, the income side of the business. It was more about delivering the product that's consistent with who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of your why. And I think that's why you're successful. And I think a lot of our leaders do talk about that. Many people do talk about income, and that's part of it. And that's okay. A lot of times we shame people that chase that, or that think that that's a good thing to even have as a goal.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's true or not. I mean, you talked a lot about your why. You brought up another book with me once before about a pumpkin patch. What was that pumpkin patch?
Yeah, so the book, it's called The Pumpkin Plan. It was Mike Michalowicz, I think is how he pronounces his last name. And this was a book early on, we touched on a little bit kind of our approach to reading what we can and learning what we can. And this was a book I came across, I think, as we were setting up the business that kind of tweaked the way we were thinking about things. And it brought up the idea of, just understanding your strengths, it can be as an individual, as a company, and going all in on those strengths to do what you do best at a high level. And then understanding that, not every type of job or every type of, project or even every client is the right fit for you. And that's okay. And just being okay with that, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was this idea, really, for me, my big takeaway from it was, just understanding your niche, right? And, I think my personal philosophy, I think a lot of businesses or people or teams, they instead of focusing on their strengths and doing what they do best, they try to do a little bit of everything. They say yes to everything. They take on everything. And that includes the type of clients they work with. Yes to everyone. And so, it's hard to put your best foot forward when you're just saying yes to everything. You're touching this and that type of work. And, I've never done that, but sure, let me give it a try. Right. And so the problem with that is, right, I think in the short term, it satisfies your need to bring in volume and bring in this or bring in that. But, it's not allowing you to really leverage your strengths in the areas or that you're best in. Right. And so, and that could also be, right, because think about it. If you get busy doing, everything from A to Z, but really your strength lies in, call it letter C, when the next client who has a letter C for you, they want you to do the work. The problem is you're busy doing everything else.
Right.
Right. You're doing all the other letters and, but that's what you're really strongest at, but you can't do it. And then so you have a choice at that point. Do you take it on knowing that you're already at capacity, or do you pass up what you're best at? And at that point, most of us will take it on. And then you trip and you stumble and you don't do it at a high level because you're all over the place, right?
Even though you're capable of
Even though you're capable
and
of.
And you are, and so do they.
That's right. And so over the long term, that approach, is that the best approach to say yes to everything? No. That's kind of where we landed. And I think it fit in well to our motto. Like, I knew what we were good at. And at the time is, we were fortunate to grow up and learn at some of the largest GCs. And what are they best known for? They're known for, delivering some of the largest, sexiest, complex work at a high level. And so, we said to ourselves, all right, well, I know we're a small firm today, but if that's where our experience is, that's what we're good at, those are the types of clientele we're used to working with, let's try to focus on that. Let's try to stick with that. And that's what we did. It was a different approach to what we do. I think the typical contracting model out there is to, you say yes and you figure out how to do it later, right? But for us, it took a certain amount of patience the last 5 years to really just kind of stay true to who we were and stick to what we knew best. And it's worked. I mean, for us, that's been our secret. That's been a big part of our success is staying true to ourselves. And look, understanding at the end of the day, we're not the best fit for every client or every type of work out there. And we're okay with that. And I think our clients now on the other side of that have grown to respect that out of us. And so they've, it's been a learning curve even for them, for us to have to explain, hey, we're not quite suited, for that type of work. And our subs are built a little differently. So they may not, be able to compete well on that type of work or that type of work. And so, this is who we are. And, it's kind of a tough conversation at first because people want to help you and they're trying to get you opportunities. But over time, they grow to understand that. And then, when the right work comes along, then, they come our way then. And
you're top of mind.
And that's right. That's right. And they also know at that point that, when we say we're hungry and we're ready to do this job, they believe it. It's not just a sell for us because that's just kind of built into how we've operated up to that point. And so it's really, I think, we were pointed that way early on, but back to your question on the book, I think that book really helped kind of solidify where we were pointed already. And because and you got to remember, as a new company, this is different. Like this, most new companies are just trying to earn a check and survive. And so this was like a risk. This was a risk for us. And will this really work? Will we just turn off too many people where they're not even going to want to work with us anymore because we were saying no and no, when we're a small company and knock on wood, it's worked. It's working. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of so many leaders will tell you that, asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Asking for help is a sign of trust. Like that other person now sees you as being way more trustworthy because you won't let something fail for the sake of pride or ego.
That's right.
And not asking for help. And I think the same thing goes for saying no It's not that we're incapable of doing that job. It's not that we're incapable of being your GC and servicing that requirement for you. It's just not what we're best at.
That's right.
And we focus on what we can deliver at the quality, at the production level and the quality level that is important to us. And we don't want to sacrifice that.
That's right.
We don't want to sacrifice that for you, our customer. You deserve better, and you can get better. And I'm sure you probably even recommended some other people.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
That you knew for that. If it's retail, you know what? I've got a guy that does fantastic retail. We undoubtedly could crush that, but it's not what we do best.
That's right. No, well, again, just well said, and that's exactly been our mentality. And it's funny. Like I've probably recommended more other GCs for work than I have in my whole career. You know, I've done that more in the last 5 years because at the end of the day, look, I want to be a resource for that, potential client or this
and
or
they'll
that.
trust you more.
That's right. That's right.
You didn't lie to me just to get the money and just to get the job.
That's right.
And
it's
then,
just being true to ourselves. And, and at the end of the day, I am actually, even though they may not like to hear it at the moment, I am looking out for them.
Right.
Ultimately, like we are.
Because then the other side of that, when you say, yes, I can do this, they trust that he can because he also told me when he couldn't.
That's right.
And so I guess the book, so I guess the idea was that there's multiple ways to grow a pumpkin.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that was the premise behind it. Like I just took away, that was my big takeaway from it. But yeah, the whole premise of the book was like, it actually went back to, I think he highlighted like, those like pumpkin competitions, like those massive pumpkins that farmers grow. And I think like the premise for them was like just understanding that, there's a specific way to grow those massive pumpkins. Like there's multiple ways to grow pumpkins. And so, these farmers would figure out like the best way to do it. And then the seeds from those bigger pumpkins, they'd reuse and replant. And then they take the biggest pumpkins from those and use those seeds. And then so like, I think the bottom line, he applied that concept to businesses and saying, look, there's multiple ways to grow a business, to grow your massive pumpkin. There's in the author's opinion, there's some validity to really kind of focusing in and being efficient on that, on how you attack that growth. And so like, again, that was kind of the big takeaway for us is just, look, trying to cut to the point of like what we do best and do it at a high level and don't spread ourselves thin of kind of, touching everything else. And so, it's helped.
How do you foster that concept and that idea and even just the things you've learned as a leader through your company's culture, right? What would you say your company's culture is? I mean, how do you guys...
Yeah, I think if I had to sum up, the values that we really push for as a company, I think the ideas of collaboration, I think diversity, and a commitment to excellence would be three kind of buzzwords that we value as, I know myself personally, Dave and our leaders, and as we've grown, and the collaboration piece is really just kind of internally and externally really working alongside each other. There's no you or I, and like at the end of the day, we're all in this to achieve the same goal. And that can be whether, I said internally and externally, because externally that can be, working alongside our design partners and, making sure at the end of the day, we're working behind the scenes to make this the most, pleasant experience for our shared collective end user possible. And, I think part of the problem, sometimes in our industry and maybe others, there's this mentality to look like the hero every chance you get. And, well, they did this or they did this, but we're good. Right. And so, I think that idea of like collaboration, and then, two for us is, I don't think diversity is a strength of our industry, the real estate industry as a whole. Right. And so I love the idea as this company grows is an idea of, we can build a pretty cool company that embraces diversity, having those different backgrounds and those different perspectives and all of that diversity sitting around a table to solve a problem and let the best ideas win out. I think that's what makes us better, right? And the third thing that I'm really excited about, and it comes back to what we do. We know what we do at a high level, and we take pride. Like our goal is to be one of the best, and you know what? At the end of the day, if we can be one of the best out there at what we do, and these values play into that. All my folks know this. Everyone who's been hired at DWATS, they didn't know it at the time, but we're looking at them through the lens of these values. And it's important of your professional background and like technical skills and all that stuff, but will they fit in with these core pillars and values of who we are ultimately?
I talk about belonging and fitting in, and it sounds like you guys have evaluated a core set of beliefs. So everyone is both belonging and fitting in, right? They're getting along with each other. One thing you mentioned that it goes right back to what you were saying. You can't be what you can't see. The diversity of thought, the diversity of background and perception and where people come from and what their background was professionally, and then maybe just nationality, men, women, all these things. So I wouldn't think of something through the lens that you do because I'm a different person and I have different experiences.
That's right.
And so you may never actually ever come to that conclusion or that thought because you don't have the experience that I have. You don't have the lens that I'm looking through, the same exact situation or problem, like, when it comes to problem solving, especially. Yeah. And that's what makes a company, I think, especially in the general because you have to think on your feet. Constantly. And if you're only used to doing things one way, when things aren't that way, what are you going to do?
That's right. Playing
the blame game. That if only they would have done what we needed them to do when they needed to do it, then it would have gone well. And the reason why it didn't go well isn't because of us, it's because of them. We had every opportunity to speak up and kind of participate in the solution, but we didn't do that. We just want to make sure it was their fault.
Yeah, right.
And you're not doing that. Yeah, well, look, I don't want to take a lot of your time. I really appreciate you spending some time with us. This has been great. It's been great to catch up with you and to talk to you. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to DC Local Leaders. We'd love to connect with you. Find us on LinkedIn and YouTube by searching DC Local Leaders, on Instagram at DC Local Leaders, or our website, dclocalleaders.com. You can find the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google, or wherever you find great podcasts. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you're a business leader and have questions on your lease and how it impacts your business's opportunities to grow, or have questions about the market, you can reach Philip directly at philip.nathram@transwestern.com. He'd love to speak with you. Until next time.